All right, welcome. We want to, tonight, Lord willing, continue looking at the 1,000 years. I shared some verses last Sunday. We talked about them, and the more I look at these verses, the more convicted I've become that when God makes reference to the 1,000 years that we read in the book of Revelation, it is really talking about the church. 1,000 years, I believe, is a reference to Babylon. Now let's look at the target verse, Revelation 20, verse 7, looking at the expiration of the 1,000 years. Let me try and get that to post. Hang on one second. Come on. Let me try that again. Oops. Just bear with me 1 second. Alright, that should do it. Nope. Why isn't it posting? For some reason, something is blocking. Let me try it another way. Copy and paste. Alright, there it is. Eric, hi, welcome. Just getting started. I want to follow up on the 1,000 years and offer what I think are some interesting verses surrounding it. Expiration of the 1,000 years, the death of the church at the revelation of Christ. The death of the church at the revelation of Christ. Revelation 20, chapter 20, verse 7. You know what? I'm not sure why. Eric, can you hear me? I'm not sure why this thing is not allowing me to post. Let me try one more time. If not, I'll have to copy and paste the rest of these verses. Revelation chapter 20, verse 7. Eric, can you hear me? Testing. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Okay, good. When the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Now, we used to look at this verses, myself included. I used to look at this verse, and the way it is structured, we're almost always going to try to relate the 1,000 years, whether literal or spiritual, to the passage of time. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, take a look at Revelation 17, verse 8. The beast, that's 1,000 years. The beast that thou sawest was and is not. And I propose here the fact that it is not is because he is bound by Christ at the separation of wheat and tares. However, right then and there, he comes out. When God interrupts the tribulation to bring the believers back from Babylon, then he allows Satan again now to go into perdition. And that's what I believe the latter part of this verse is referring to. Shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell upon the earth shall wonder whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, is not, and yet is. Revelation 17, verse 10. Now try to focus on the pattern of these verses, and then hopefully you might see what I'm offering. In this verse here, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but this I think is pointing to the believers in tribulation, the 5 that are fallen. They were a part of Babylon. They make up the number 7. So there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. One is, you see how similar this is to Revelation 20, verse 7? No, actually, I'm sorry, Revelation 17, verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. 5 are fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. When he cometh, right, when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now I know that we've looked at these in the context, relating part of this to the New Testament church age and how Satan is revealed and he goes into perdition. No, I propose this, the whole thing is happening in the day of the Lord. It begins with the tribulation. Remember, the book of Revelation is the revelation of Jesus Christ. So it's really about the unfolding, well, that portion of the tribulationary, that is the judgment of God on the church, a time when Satan goes into perdition. He continues a short space. The short space is the tribulation, but we have to read it, Lord willing, in the proper context, because the latter part, when Christ is revealed, that too can be seen as a short space when God is allowing judgment to come on the unsaved body. Revelation 17:11, and the beast, more of the same verses. Let's see. The beast that thou sawest, the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. Now, remember, I mentioned just now that the five are fallen. I think it is pointing with judgment beginning at the house of God. The believers, they fall by the sword, by flame, by captivity many days. God is bringing them through the fire. And then he separates them from Babylon. That's the redemption. That's, I believe the number 8 is referring to the beast that is healed. Now, it's not talking about Satan, surfacing again in tribulation. I used to think that, but looking at the Bible carefully, the deadly wound that is healed, that is God redeeming the church. Not the whole church, because we know from the rest of the Bible, Satan goes into perdition and the unsaved in the body, they're cast into the lake of fire. But the number 8 here, I think it is pointing to salvation, the salvation or the redemption of the church. So it is the same beast. He is the 8th and is of the 7th and goeth into perdition. That latter part, again, going into perdition, I think it is pointing to the time when Christ is revealed and the unsaved in the body, they're cast into the lake of fire. The beast, the church, at the revelation of Christ, two things are happening. There is the judgment. Satan is bound 1,000 years. Yet there's also the believers coming out of tribulation. And then right then and there, at the same time, God is unleashing. He is allowing Satan now to go and devour, allowing the church now to commit suicide. That's the aspect of it, I think, relating to going into perdition. Okay, now in Revelation, did I read this? Yeah, Revelation 13 verse 3. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. That is, God, Christ is revealed. He redeems Babylon. There is salvation. At the same time, all the world wandered after the beast. That's the unsaved body. Now they are worshiping Antichrist. That's the time when he goes into perdition. And I think we'll see more of this, hopefully, in the remaining verses. Revelation 13:14. And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Now, the only way that this could apply is that we know that the church does not live unto Christ. So you see how important it is, again, to understand that you and I, we were in Babylon. It was a real judgment coming on the whole body in tribulation, right? So we don't want to take on any errors or, thinking somehow that the believers, they cannot be deceived, they cannot be fooled. I'm proposing that these verses are pointing to the fact that they too, the elect, they were in Babylon and now they live. They were a part of the beast. It was one and the same. Remember, let both grow together until the harvest. Revelation 25, but the rest of the dead. Now again, I think God is going back to the redemption of the body. The rest of the dead, that's the elect, live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. That is, until God had brought judgment to Babylon. Now, this is not going to be easy to see, and that's why I wanted to come back to these verses again. If we're reading them in the light of the whole Bible, keep in mind that Satan going into perdition, that's the 1,000 years coming to an end. Isn't that interesting? So the rest of the dead, they live when God judges Babylon. Can you see that? So the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. That's the separation of wheat and tares, the redemption of the body. Revelation 15 verse 1. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues. In them is filled up. Now who is the wrath of God? Who is the wrath of God? It's Babylon again, isn't it? So in them is filled up the wrath of God. That again, that's the end. That's the devastation coming on Babylon, on the 1,000 years. The 1,000 years coming to an end. 1,000 years, finding fulfillment and judgment at the revelation of Christ. And in Revelation 20, verse 3, the wrath of God is Babylon. Yes, amen, Eric. In verse 3, Revelation 20, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. Now these verses, I propose, they're very difficult. There's no way that we would understand them except to try and look at the pattern, the gospel, that everything is about Christ ultimately. Yet in judgment, it is referring to Antichrist. So the years is pointing to the church. 1,000 years, a judgment on the church. But another thing that we've talked about in this room, I'll touch on it, and also at the end give you some relating studies that hopefully might shed more light on it. You see, in order for God to bring salvation to the church had to die. The body had to die. And it began with the death of Christ. Remember, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. Not the blood of Christ. It is the blood of Christ historically. It is also the blood of Christ, I believe, in tribulation, the fact that the church had to die. And it's this death that allowed God to bring the believers out of Babylon. Because now sin was atoned for. Now the land is being cleansed. So there is an intimate relationship between the death of the church and the salvation of the body. That makes sense? Anyone disagree with that? Any questions? All right, let me see if I can offer some additional verses. Now, looking at the mystery, here's another section, another area that I wasn't seeing before, but I think also it does relate. The mystery of God, that's Christ, but in judgment it is Antichrist. Yes, Eric, exactly. Just like the death of the firstborn. The firstborn is the church, right? So the plague that came on the church, the death of the firstborn. So yeah, it is the death of the body. That death allowed God now to redeem the body. And that's something I think, again, Lord willing, we'll see. It is a pattern that we see in the Bible. Okay, now the mystery of God, the church that became Babylon, the church is now the mystery. It is the Christ. And it is revealed to the elect. Now, all this thing about the mystery, the revelation of Christ, it is the fact that I believe God is revealing his judgment on Babylon. It's not that Christ himself is the mystery. Well, he is the mystery. But the revelation of Christ is the fact that the believers see the judgment. They see Antichrist. They see God's judgment being manifest. Isn't that amazing? So indirectly, Christ is the judgment. He is the judgment on Babylon. So we When Christ is revealed, it is the fact that Antichrist, the believers now, they are allowed to see God's wrath on the church. Yeah, exactly. Revelation 20, verse 7. And when the 1,000 years, now look at this very carefully. When the 1,000 years are expired, if the 1,000 years is relating to the church, then this verse, I believe, it's saying when God judges Babylon, when that judgment has come, when that 1,000 years are expired, right, they see Babylon in the church, correct. When the 1,000 years are expired, when God judges Babylon, Satan shall be loose. Remember, he is bound 1,000 years and then he is loose a little season. Yeah, they see the wrath of God. That's Babel. Yeah. So when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan is loose. God is redeeming the believers. Babylon is fallen, come out of my people. Yet at the same time, he is going into perdition. He is loosed out of his prison. Okay, well, why out of the prison? Well, because remember Revelation 20, that he was bound 1,000 years. He is bound in order not to deceive the elect. Well, the elect are not deceived in that they come out of Babylon. So you see, again, it is the death of the church. It is the end of that 1,000 years that gave way, that made it possible for the church to be redeemed. Can you see that? Revelation 10, verse 7. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished. Now here's another verse. If we look at it on the surface, I think we are going to misinterpret it. I used to think, okay, well, the mystery of God is finished. That is, now God is his salvation program. No, it is Babylon that is finished. Can you see that? Babylon. Why? Well, because God now is allowing it to go into perdition. God is destroying Babylon. When he shall begin to sound at the seventh trumpet, the mystery of God. Well, it's not Christ that's finished. Christ is a mystery, but in judgment it is Antichrist. And the word finished there is the same word that we're looking at being fulfilled or to expire. Yeah, yeah, isn't that amazing? So the 1,000 years expires, the 1,000 years is finished, the 1,000 years is judged. Yeah. The 1,000 years is judged. That's Babylon. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 7. Hang on one second. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Can you see it again? That's Babylon. He was in the world from the beginning. The mystery of iniquity, 1,000, Babylon is judged. Yeah. The mystery of iniquity, that's Babylon. Well, can you hold on to your thought there? I'm offering these verses. Please look at... All right, let me put a red dot on you. You're welcome to stay in the room. I want to finish offering these verses, and then if you have a question, I'll be more than happy to try to share that with you, or to relate to your question. You notice how some people, they have their minds set up. They already know, but yet they're not going to look at what you have to offer. And then that's the problem I think we're having today. Yeah, I know he left, Eric. Just to make a point, again, you know, you come out of the blue, well, that's the Vatican. Well, what verses do you have to support that? It's just amazing, the blindness that comes on the church. Okay, so the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth, that's God the Holy Spirit, will let until... Now here's another section, the latter part of the verse. I used to think, I know there's some others that are thinking that God is taken out of the way. No, it's not the Holy Spirit that's taken out of the way. That pronoun here, that second he, it is Babylon again. So God allows it until he, that's Babylon, is taken out of the way. The way is Christ. So he is taken out of the midst. He is taken out of the way. And that, again, that has to do with the expiration of the 1,000 years. right? Revelation 17 verse 5. And upon her head, let's see, hang on one second. Upon her head was a name written, Mystery Babylon. So now here's Antichrist. Christ is the mystery of God, but it has to do with the revelation of that mystery that is altogether concerned with God's judgment on the church, right? Romans 1 verse 18, for the wrath of God, and that's what we're talking about just now. The wrath of God is revealed. Who is the wrath of God? Who is the wrath of God? Well, it's Babylon, right? Babylon is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth, that is, they hold Christ in unrighteousness. So the revelation of Christ is the revelation of Antichrist. Can we say that? Does that make sense? I think it does. The revelation of Christ is the revelation of Antichrist. So in other words, it is Christ that is allowing his people to see his judgment on the church. You see the relationship there? Yeah. Amazing, right? By God's grace, I think, amen. Well, praise God. Ephesians 3, verses 3 and 4. Let me post that. How that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery. He made known unto me the mystery, as I wrote aforetime in few words, whereby when you read ye may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ. Again, the mystery of Christ is not the fact that, okay, well, I've become saved and that's a mystery that's revealed. No, that's what I used to think. That's what I think many of us have thought in the past. It's the mystery of Christ in bringing salvation to the people. I believe it's the other way around. It's the mystery of Christ in the sense that, I guess in some way they relate, because only those that are saved will be able to relate to the mystery that is Babylon, right? Having made known, Ephesians 1 verse 9, having made known unto us the mystery of his will according to the good pleasure which he hath purposed in himself. Just a few more verses and then I'll offer another section. Take a look at 1 Corinthians 15:51. Behold, I show you a mystery. What is that talking about? What do you suppose God is saying here? I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. Well, to be changed is to be coming out of Babylon, right? The new man, baptized, going into the wrath of God, the water. And now, if any man is in Christ, he is a new creation. But the mystery is the fact that in the day of the Lord, Antichrist is revealed. And that's how the believers, they're no longer sleeping. We should, yeah, amen, exactly, Eric. That's what I'm offering. That's what I'm offering. Behold, I show you Babylon. We shall not all sleep. So in the context, it is speaking of the revelation of Christ. The revelation of Christ, again, I propose, is the revelation of Babylon, Antichrist. Romans chapter 11:25. I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. Now that I think, I'm not going to get too far into it, but I do believe that it is referring to what I was offering in the book of Revelation. Satan is bound, and now God unseals the Bible. Now that the 144,000 have been sealed, God is going to redeem. He brings revelation. Yeah, it says it there. He brings revelation to the elect. Let no man deceive you. 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Notice the harmony, I believe, in these verses. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin. That's Babylon. That's the 1,000 years. That's the mystery that is revealed. The man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Revelation 17, verse 7. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman. You see that again? It is a mystery of Babylon, and of the beast, same person, same entity, the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Even thus, Luke chapter 17, verse 30. Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Isn't that amazing? When Christ is revealed, what happens when the Son of Man is revealed? There is judgment and salvation. In the day, and by the way, God uses the phrase Son of Man also to refer to the church, right? So the Son of Man is revealed. The revelation of the Son of Man is the revelation of Antichrist. That's the man of sin being revealed. Even the mystery, one last verse in this category. Yeah. Even the mystery which have been hid from ages. Can you see the Bible, why the Bible was sealed? That the mystery that God had in view there was his judgment on the church. Can you see that? Even the mystery which have been hid from ages, from generations, but now is made manifest to his saints. Well, that is Christ, but really, ultimately, it is God's judgment on the church, Babylon becoming the mystery Babylon, and the day when God reveals his righteous judgments on the body. All right, let me pause for 1 second. I have to check on something. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Can you guys hear me? We're still here? Yeah, hid from ages. That's Babylon. Yeah, amen. That's additional language that seems to be pointing again to the wrath of God, Antichrist. All right, now here's another section. Let's take a look at the shortening of the days. Something, again, that I think is totally new in our understanding, in my understanding anyway, on how God is judging Babylon. Take a look at the shortening of the days, the death of the church at the revelation of Christ. And that, again, is saying the same thing as the 1,000 years coming to an end. Isn't that amazing? Because the days there, spiritually, it is pointing to Christ. It is pointing to the church. So the shortening of the days that we used to relate somehow to the calendar, and I think it does to some degree, but it's not. That's not what the substance was. It led us to the Sabbath or the Jubilee, but really, when we look at these verses today, I think God is referring to the death of the church. In Revelation 20, verse 7, let me post the verse on the 1,000 years again. And when the 1,000 years are expired, that is when the church age comes to an end, when God brings judgment to Babylon. When the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. The church goes into perdition. The days of his youth, Psalm 89, verse 45. The days of his youth hast thou shortened. Thou hast covered him with shame. So to shorten the days is really to bring judgment to the church. Right? Anyone disagree with that? The shortening of the days, it's the same thing, again, I propose, when we look at the 1,000 years. 1,000 years expire. 1,000 years come to an end. The church is no longer prolonging its days, rather God has cut the days short. Psalm 182, verse 23. We see covered with Babylon, yeah. He weakened my strength. And who is the strength? Again, the strength is Christ. Remember Samson, his strength was in his hair. That was a type of the strength of the church. And when the hair was cut, his strength was gone. Christ was gone. So he weakened my strength in the way he shortened my days. That's judgment on the church. So the shortening of the days is not, in the first instance, it's not talking about from 1988 to 1994, although we do see a pattern of that on the calendar. And I think the timing of it is not coincidental, but rather the spiritual is really about the death of the church. So he shortened my days. And here's another verse. Now, can you see how beautifully, Lord willing, they tie in now to the whole language on the judgment of Babylon? Except those days should be shortened. Now, that's what I mentioned before. There's an intimate relationship between the death of the church and the redemption of the body. The church had to die. There had to be the shedding of blood. So except those days, except God had bring judgment to Babylon, there should no flesh be saved. The land could not be cleansed. Right? So except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. The believers would not be coming out of Babylon. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. So you see the relationship that exists between the death of the church, the shedding of blood, and the redemption of the body. We see that in Hebrews 9, verse 22. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood. Whose blood? Well, historically, the blood of Christ. Spiritually, the blood of Christ in tribulation. And the blood of Babylon. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. So the death of the church also makes way for the redemption of the body. Almost all things are by the law purged with blood. Without the shedding of blood is no remission. Two more verses. Numbers 35:33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are, for blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed. You see that? Except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. So the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. You see the relationship there again between the death of the church and the redemption of the body. And finally, here's a verse that might be out of context. Well, not out of context, but if we look at the context of the verse itself, we find this in the Old Testament, we'll see how it would relate to the expiration of the 1,000 years. 1 Samuel 18:26. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. And the 1,000 years were not expired. That's salvation. That's to find favor with God. So the expiration of the 1,000 years then would be pointing to the judgment on the church, right? All right, let me I'm going to post a conclusion, and then I am going to offer two studies, the name of two related studies that you can find on the website. The Bible appears, let me post the whole thing. Oops. Alright, here it is. The Bible appears to be linking 1,000 years to the church. In judgment, this 1,000 years expires, finishes, fulfilled, meaning that God has brought judgment to it. Now, at the revelation of Christ, there is both judgment and salvation. So at the end of the 1,000 years, that is at the death of Babylon, at the death of the church, the elect find redemption as they come out of Babylon, while the unsaved church goes into perdition. Satan goes into perdition. That is the total devastation, the total destruction of the body at the revelation of Christ. Now, the studies that I mentioned, purging with blood is one of them. And there again, hopefully, with the verses offered there, you might be able to see the relationship that I was relating to between the death of the church and the redemption of the body. So these are the two. You should already have a link to the website, so I'm not going to post that. But you can look at the purging with blood, and then cleansing the land. Now, cleansing the land is talking about salvation, but it's a salvation that comes in the form of God bringing destruction to Babylon. That's how the land is cleansed, by the blood of him that shed it. Okay, any question? Let me turn off the recorder.